A very warm welcome to the 15th episode of the World of Wind Power, the WWEA podcast. My name is Stefan Gsänger, and today I am talking to you together with our president, Dr. Irfan Mirza. Irfan, it's my pleasure that we can again today speak and inform our friends about the status of wind power around the world.
Thank you, Stefan. Thank you very much. It's always a pleasure talking to your audience. And, good morning, good afternoon, good evening, wherever you people are listening. As I know that your podcast has, going to all around the world. So there are different timing zones. So thank you very much for inviting me.
Yeah, and today we will speak about the global status. Usually the podcast deals with certain countries. We started this podcast, it was more or less exactly a year ago, with the general introduction of the global situation of wind power. That was, of course, mainly referring to the year 2023, which was a quite good year for wind power. Today we want to speak about the global status of wind power in the previous year, in the year 2024, or end of the year 2024, which was, well, not that kind of positive, because although what we see is still there is, of course, an increase in wind power installations, there was a kind of stagnation which we didn't expect. But I think globally, it's very interesting to see that wind power is now really one of the big sources. When you look back, it's now 45 years or so that we started this modern wind power. We have a global share in the electricity demand of more than 10%. That's, by the way, now more than nuclear power is. When you look at this, it's quite impressive, isn't it?
Yeah, absolutely. This is amazing, and the way you can see the exponential growth of wind power in the last decade or so. I think this is really impressive, and hats off to all those people who have been involved in this. Not only the turbine manufacturers, but the developers and even the governments and the policy frameworks, which obviously we will talk later that there are a lot of issues in that as well. But there are some countries who are actually positively, you know, moving this forward through their policy incentives as well.
Yeah, well, let's talk about the countries a bit later, and first still look at the global situation. We've once kind of had a look at in which time period there's been a tenfold increase in wind power installations, and we see the 10 megawatt were achieved in 1981, so that's 44 years ago. 2 years later, 100 megawatt. Then again, 3 years later, 1,000 megawatt. Then it took till 1999, 13 years to come from 1,000 to 10,000 megawatt. The very dynamic period was at the beginning of this century. It was less than 10 years, 9 years, there's an increase from 10,000 to 100,000 megawatt. And in the year 2023, then in the period of 15 years, we have now more than 1 million megawatt of global wind power installation. Actually, end of last year, it was, according to our records, 1.17 million of megawatt. That is really, really big. This is almost like mobile phone technology. I mean, really exponential growth.
Yeah, absolutely. When you see a technology like wind power, where there are site constraints also, you need to understand this is not like solar because the sun is everywhere. So every country, everywhere, obviously you have sun most of the time. So wind is difficult because you have to find the sites where there are appropriate amount of winds available for the economic installation of wind turbines. So considering all this, I think this is a phenomenal growth.
Yes. So when we look at also how the added capacity developed over the last, in particular, the last couple of years, what you see that is not so steady. Of course, when you over the years, it's always been growing, but there's been some ups and downs in the development. We had a kind of now almost doubling of the global wind capacity over the last year, 6, 7 years, which is also quite good. But new installed wind capacity, we talk about the reasons for that in a moment. You see that 2022, there was 86,000 megawatt, 86 gigawatt around of global capacity additions, which was a bit disappointing for many of us. And that was the year of the global gas and energy crisis, fossil energy crisis, I would call it. And then 2023 jumped up, but last year was almost stable. How have you perceived this? I mean, you are personally based in Pakistan, which also has its, but you're also connected to the global industry. Um, how is that reflected in when you talk to colleagues?
Yeah, basically, I think this is what we are going to talk next as well. But if when you see this growth from 22 to 23, this is an amazing growth. But now from 23 to 24, it seems like a steady growth. One can see that okay, this is a great growth, but unfortunately, the majority of the countries, the wind power growth is not as expected. Majority of the share, which we'll talk in the next slide, is has been taken by actually China, and then there are few emerging countries as well, but mainly the role of the policies. It is basically in some countries the availability of funds, the political scenarios. For example, in countries like Pakistan, so there are a lot of issues coming up, which because of that, the growth is not as it should be.
We had predicted much more growth for 2024, even in the middle of the year 2024, when we made a survey amongst our members. They predicted substantially higher than the 121 gigawatt. But of course, now this situation is not continuing. Now, looking into the countries, uh, that's really amazing when you look at how the countries have developed. We've since quite a while had, actually, since the beginning of this century almost, we've had China, United States, Germany, India, and then Spain as a big market always played a dominant role. What we see now, kind of China is become a class on its own, because out of the 121 gigawatt that were installed last year, 87 gigawatt were installed only in China, which is, I think it's like more than 70%, 72%. That is on the one hand, reason to congratulate our Chinese colleagues, right? I mean, they're really doing a fantastic job there.
Absolutely, we must congratulate China because they are bearing the flag of the wind power, not only in terms of their own development, but basically in terms of the development of the overall market from the manufacturing point of view. And then also the most important thing is that when you want to do these things or install these things or erect these things, you need the companies. So majority of the companies we see, the EPC companies, are the Chinese companies. So they are basically the flag bearer of wind at this point in time in the world. There is no doubt about it.
Yeah. I mean, I visited for the first time China in 2004 when China had an installed capacity of, it was around 500 megawatt. I think at the end of the year, they were like 700 megawatt. Now it's 1,000 times as much. So that's really impressive. At that first visit, I also visited a blade manufacturer which tested the first megawatt blade that was domestically made in China. Now, today, Chinese companies are manufacturing turbines of 18 megawatt a single unit or even more. I think they are now in the 20 megawatt as well. That they are really now technologically the leaders, but not really outside China, right? I mean, I think Pakistan, they are have a strong market share in Pakistan, also Australia, but outside those two countries, there's not that much export yet.
Yeah, the scenario is changing. First of all, yes, they have a very strong presence in the Pakistani market. But now, for example, in the new, you need to see that there are new markets emerging in 2025, for example. Let me tell you where I'm living right now. I'm living in the Gulf these days, you know that. So the Saudi market is coming up very strong. The Egypt, the UAE market. So these are the markets which are coming up in addition to when you see Uzbekistan and countries on that side as well. But you see there's a lot of wind power development happening in this part of the world as well. This is not only they are doing the wind power projects alone, but they are doing it as a hybrid projects as well. They are using wind power for planning of developing hydrogen. They are for their complete project of seawater desalination as well with their. Okay, so Gulf states, as you know, they are not using wind power as a wind power, but they also use wind power as a complete package in a hybrid mode as well. For example, the seawater desalination, and they are also working for development of hydrogen as well. So these are the countries which are coming up, emerging very fast. So I just heard a Chinese company. I met Goldman CEO a few days back, and he was telling me that they just won two contracts of 2 gigawatt and 1 gigawatt in Saudi. So it means the Chinese companies are going outside as well, very, very fast. And these are big projects. We were used to do 100 megawatt, 50 megawatt project. It seems to be a very, very big project as we were discussing the history as well. But now 1 gigawatt, 2 gigawatt projects are like a single project. This is something, very, very something crazy. So I think the Chinese companies are going out, and we must not forget the European companies like our members, Irfan, for example, and they have done a lot of technological advancements or supported the technological advancements throughout the last century as well and throughout the last decades as well. And then there are European countries, European companies, they are performing really, really well as well. And so yes, Chinese companies, but since we are talking about China because of the installations they have made last year, so I'm just saying that they are the flag bearer at this point in time.
Hmm. It's also interesting. I mean, when you look at the previously dominating markets, they all have rather modest growth rates. United States installations went down from 6.4 gigawatt to a bit over 4 gigawatt. Even the German market, which has some positive trends because there's now more permitting, but the net installations also went down. The only country which had an even higher growth rate, if you look at the top 10 markets, was Brazil. Also, I mean, one of those which 10 years ago wasn't really on the in the landscape of wind power, in the map of wind power. They have now strong growth, and they had the second largest market for new wind turbines in the year 2024, which I believe is also a good sign because South America is a huge continent, hundreds of millions of people, so it's important that wind power plays a role there as well. No?
Absolutely, this is amazing. I agree with you 101% that Brazil come up strong. The second, I think, more than 5 gigawatts of installation last year. This is no joke. And in a country like Brazil, I think hats off to them. And definitely their policy plays a very important role in that. So I think this also shows us that if there is a commitment, if there is, if we really wanted to do, so we can move in the right directions. And actually, this is the wind power, the overall renewable energies, the way the climate issues are there in the world. I think these are the technologies where we all need to support and we all need to wish that they'll come up. I'm not only talking, since we are talking about the wind right now, and you and I belong to a wind association, but we personally wish that other renewable energy technologies can grow as well, and we can work in the as in our board meetings as well. We talk about supporting the other organizations and working with them to develop hybrid solutions as well. So basically, this climate uh, change issue which we are facing right now, we all need to support this development.
Yeah, that's extremely important indeed. So yeah, it's good to see that more and more countries, you mentioned some of the really now new markets, very new markets in the Gulf region, as you said, there's some or Arab countries, there's new investments. Central Asia is something very interesting. And as we just mentioned, Brazil, which by the way made a big step because they are now the fifth largest market, and Spain, who was one of the big five for many, many years, they are just number seven now. And so you see there some things are moving and changing, and it's a more kind of globalized sector now, no? And look at kind of again the role on the one hand that China is playing, which gets a bigger share of the pie, but the rest of the world, fortunately, is getting more colorful.
Yeah, absolutely. So I think it is becoming colorful, and at the same time, I would like to see the share of the rest of the world little more than what it is right now. Let's hope for the best, because there are so many countries, and we should not only focus on the 10 or 12 big countries. So basically, the rest of the world is actually very, very important
Yeah,
if
that
we
is true.
talk about the climate issues as well.
I mean, we haven't talked much yet about India, which is now the largest country by population, which is bigger by population than China. And again, I mean, their installation number with they've crossed now 50,000 megawatt, which is yeah, good number, but it's still like 10% of what China has been doing. So there's a huge potential. There is no doubt about that. Again, looking at the new installations, obviously, that is something we should maybe talk a little bit about that, because new installations in 2024, China with a share of almost three-quarter, that really is an alarming signal, I found, because I've noticed that the share of or installations in the rest of the world, even if you include Brazil, dropped from around 41 to 37 gigawatts. So that's an maybe almost a fifth decrease. What's your perception? Why is that happening? China obviously is doing things well because market is still growing there. Not only that they add capacity, but they add every year still more capacity. And we just heard that 2025 they will add even more capacity. No? What is your perception? Why are other countries struggling?
First of all, this is a not a very very simple answer to this. There are a lot of issues, including the technical issues as well. So there are two type of issues why the rest of the world is not following what China is doing. One is the technical issues, and the second is the policy and the regulatory issues, the permit issues we can call it. And you are absolutely right. What I heard is that China is going to this year. I think the installation is like 82,000 megawatts. I'm hearing that it's going to be more than 100,000 next year
80,
as well.
I was 87 almost, no? Last year.
87, sorry, 87. So more than 100,000 next year. So this is going to be this is what I'm hearing also. So the infrastructure issues, for example, are not there in Europe. But there are a lot of it. For example, when you talk about countries like very big countries like India, so there is going to be a lot of issues with related to their technical capacity for transmission of this wind power as well. And this similar.
So you are obviously referring to, on the one hand, this what we call developing emerging countries. So those who may be struggling sometimes also with infrastructure, because infrastructure is growing in a country like India, for example, strong growth because of the strong economic growth, etc. So you see some specific challenges in such kind of countries, which is, I think India may be similar like Brazil or maybe also Pakistan or some Middle East countries.
Yeah, this is exactly what my point is, that certain countries have technological issues as well which actually hinders the growth of wind energy. Because when they see the options available to them, and obviously these are countries which are growing countries right now, and when they see the per unit tariff options available to them, and options are not only the generation cost, but the transmission cost of that electricity from one place to the other, and what are the options available to them. So sometimes, and then people still, for example, in Europe, the grids are interconnecting grids. So they don't need to have kind of a base load available for that to compensate for example, the wind power I should not, variability of a wind power. But for example, when you talk about countries like India, so it might be, they need to think about a lot of, so I don't want to, this is not a technical podcast, but let me at least highlight for the viewers that basically it is not that the countries don't want to put up wind power. These are the solar and the wind are the cheapest form of energy at this point in time on the planet Earth right now. So there is no point in thinking anything else as far as the generation cost is concerned. But obviously, when they think, so there are certain hindering factors which are the technological hindering factors, and there are some hindering factors which are the policy hindering factors. So I think I know that I have a lot of Indian friends which are keep on telling me that there is a lot of development going on as far as the grid infrastructure is concerned, because it's a big country. Similarly, in Pakistan, they are also trying to have their infrastructure, as far as the grid infrastructure I'm talking about, to make it a little better. But we need to talk about countries which have the infrastructure available, and they need to somehow ease the permits and ease the regulatory process somehow, because that is, I think, for me, is the biggest hindrance factor in the growth of wind energy or renewable energy at this point in time.
Yeah, that's what many people are complaining about. I mean, on the one hand, we just, I think many of our audience, they heard about that there was a big blackout on the Iberian Peninsula. There are grid issues also in those countries where you usually expect that does not frequently happen. And of course, there were many people who were blaming renewables for that, which was actually not the case. So there's some technical problems, but anyway, we all have to either adjust our networks, grids around the world, or build them new. That's probably the difference. The one was part of the country, parts of the countries have to adjust, others have to kind of build it new. But you're right, this permitting delays, or we did some time ago a survey how long it takes to get the permitting process. And the average time was like 5 years. That is too long. There is no need that from starting the planning to the wind farm being operational, it takes more than 5 years. In some countries, even 6, 7, 8 years. There is no doubt about that. That needs to be kind of shortened, and you can still do a proper planning, taking into account all the aspects. One aspect that I believe also plays an important role now are the socio-economic, the social aspects, because permitting always goes hand in hand with what the local people do believe, because it's often the local authorities. The people who are kind of supporting, and they are the drivers of the wind farms, permitting is smoother in that cases. At least one of our board members from Germany, he has a locally owned wind farm, and they didn't have any objection. So that went very fast and smoothly.
Absolutely, Stephen. I think because this is this topic is very close to our hearts, and we would definitely talk in this podcast. But before I go there, since we were talking about the issues, one issue I was thinking, but before since our podcast has some technical glitches as well, so I forgot, or it was in between, and that is the financial capacity, because
Mhm.
putting up big wind farms, the third and the most important thing is that, okay, even if you have the infrastructure, even if you have a policy and the permits available, but for example, a private sector has to come into that. So there are a lot of issues, the financial issues, for example, that are different in developing countries, for example, and different in underdeveloped countries and different in developed countries as well. So these are range of issues which are happening. For example, if you talk about some African countries and others, the people are willing to put up the turbine, the permits, are easy to get and things like that. But the problem is that they don't find it how to reappropriate the money, how to get the money out from that country, because more and more countries at this point in time are facing the economic crunch, and they don't want that, for example, all the foreign currency or dollars would go out of the country. So since again this is not a financial podcast as well, so let's not go into the details. But this is another hurdle which is stopping the growth of these technologies as well. Now coming back to that, first of all, we must congratulate our board member Heinrich that he is paving the way for this kind of wind plants where the community is involved. And now this is again for everybody's interest that World Wind Energy Association is now developing the guidelines for the proper engagement of communities as well when we are doing these big projects. So this is a very, very important topic, and we need to see that this is very important, that we should not have a gigawatt of a project up and running and the big transmission lines are there and the people living, because most of the time these plants, especially the wind power projects, are at a place which are kindly a little remote of the main cities and things, and that there are people living in these areas, for example, doesn't have these electricity. I have seen in many countries that there are big transmission lines going there, going towards the main cities, and the people living under those transmission lines doesn't have the electricity, doesn't have the basic infrastructure.
Mhm.
So I think if we spend on those areas billions and millions and billions of dollars, we should at least think about the community. This is actually very important. So this is the issue of the underdeveloped and developing countries. The developed countries, the issues are different, because then they have the right, and then they would not let the investors do the project because they don't want that they do the project and don't have anything. So that is why we need to have a balance, and that is where I think World Wind Energy Association is playing a very important role by developing a detailed guidelines for the community engagement in different regions.
Mhm. Well, and you talked about financing. That is certainly a bottleneck in those so-called developing countries, because let's say in a country like my home country, Germany, equity is not really a big challenge. I mean, you get a loan easily at the bank because it's a proven technology. Even the communities, they have a lot of money. I mean, there's many individuals who can invest 10,000, and if you have 1,000 people each investing 10,000, then you have your equity for the wind farm. That's not the case if we talk about Kenya, for example, or Mali, or like that. No? So because people don't have thousands on their savings account. That's something that needs to be addressed indeed, next to those bureaucratic hurdles. And I believe that that's also something where we have to kind of talk with international donor agencies, because many of these projects are funded by, let's say, some public co-financing, the World Bank or Asian Development Bank or banks like that, where maybe we should talk with them and find this. I think you call it sweet spots where we need the minimum of foreign equity and not increase the burden on the public debt of countries, but rather make the benefits that it's actually cheaper energy that they materialize for the countries. Let's say a country like Kenya or whatever it is.
It's a very, very important point, Stephen. And I think this is where, if you remember, when we were together in the COP28, we were discussing about the idea of developing some kind of a fund where that fund would be, because creating enabling environment in the countries, because there are hundreds of countries in this world, and not everybody's making use of this cheap electricity, because there are a lot of issues in those countries as well. So creating this kind of a fund which would create enabling environment, which would link technical thing with the financials and supporting. So this is the kind of requirement we were discussing. I think I would just wanted to say that we were discussing that, and some kind of a framework is required. You're absolutely right that people should get the benefit of this cheap electricity at home, rather than all the foreign investors come invest and take the money out of the country. For them, then for the locals or for the communities, it doesn't matter if it is wind, if it is solar, if it is thermal, if it is anything else, because people are just coming, they are investing and taking their money. So this is a complicated problem, because investors have a different issue. If we don't have investors and the lenders available, there will be no project. And we just want to create a balance and try to see how best we can come up with a solution. It is not that we don't want the investors to come and take their money out, but for example, if they start taking 100% of the money out or reappropriate from that particular country, that country is not going to use or reap the benefits of the cheap electricity. So that balance is actually very, very important. So let's see where we can play our role as World Wind Energy Association in at least highlighting the issues or suggesting few things. So let's see how things will be.
So if we kind of try to summarize, now we've, I think, hopefully explained the global situation well enough. There is some reason to be confident that there will be strong growth in the future. At least the big leader, China, is going to lead. There is no doubt about that. And other countries hopefully will be inspired. So what we see as the challenges, and they are at the same time, of course, also the solutions. Let me kind of summarize or try to summarize. One is the permitting processes. They are, I think, everywhere too bureaucratic. It should be streamlined. I think every country can improve on that side. We have some grid restrictions in some places. We have issues, or it would really be very useful to improve community engagement. And I think also there is a lot of room for improvement, many parts of the world. And especially for, again, what we call the developing world, we should think of or look into finding innovative financing approaches so that can be overcome. You agree with that? Grid, permitting, community engagement, and financial innovation, that these are the 4 areas, or would you add anything?
Yeah, I think in this short time we have discussed that, and you summarized it well. This is what we have discussed, and maybe in some other podcast, some other time, we will take issue by issue and discuss that in detail of what are going to be the critical parameters in those issues, and maybe at one podcast where we can also discuss the overall issues in the wind power, because there are many issues in development. These are obviously, we are just trying to highlight the overall 4 or 5 big issues at this point in time. And if there is not going to be a big economic crisis in the world, so I think I see the wind power is growing.
Yes. Yeah, Irfan, it's been a great pleasure. I hope that our audience also find it interesting to listen to us. With this, we would say thank you very much to our audience. Irfan, always a pleasure talking to you. And with this, I'd say thank you and goodbye.
Thank you. Goodbye, Stefan. Thank you very much. Bye bye. Take care.